everyone, and welcome back to the World Explorer podcast. This is the podcast where every week we take a random prompt and build an entire world around it. My name is Cassie, and I'm joined with Isaac.
Hello there! So last week we world built a world where the people could transfer their souls into animals, and essentially every time they transferred their soul, they lost a little bit of themselves, and this little bit of themselves it would get whittled down to a point where their soul ends up belonging to a goddess that they made a deal with in order to have this ability to transfer their souls in the first place. And so now we are continuing on that world where we are world building the afterlife and what exactly this goddess is collecting souls for, because she was specifically collecting souls to create an army.
A very well-trained army.
Yes, an army where essentially every soldier is an elite.
Yeah, because these people, we said that they'd have 8 lives that they got to live, and that this goddess was picking people she knew would use those 8 lives to tone, like, warrior-based skills. So, like, either fighting animals or just swapping between people with different skill sets that they could then take and develop for themselves, so that way they could become the ultimate warrior once their 8 lives were up and they were finally sent into the afterlife.
Yeah, so now we got to figure out the afterlife. So what is this goddess doing with all of these souls, do you think? What is the purpose of her army? Who is she trying to fight?
It's gotta be another god, right?
Well, obviously, yeah. Like, you can't have a god with an army designed to fight, I don't know, a fish. Unless it's a fish god.
Or a goddess's pet goldfish who escaped into the real world and got turned into a giant monster that then she sends a monkey and a monk to go and take out for her.
Ah, yes, that's great.
That's an actual story.
Yep. And it's a great one.
Yep. Anyways, no, I don't think she needs the army to take care of a goddess's pet goldfish.
No, it's gotta be another god, but thing is, I imagine the gods being so powerful that they could probably just wipe out an army instantaneously. So this wouldn't be something like needing to overpower a god, I wouldn't think. This would be something where it needs to more overwhelm a god, where they're attacking so many points, maybe scattered about, where the god can't handle them all.
I think it goes to, like, what type of idea of warrior we want. Like, I know you have the idea of the mass army, and then I have the idea of, like, a more smaller elite task force. So, either overwhelming or element of surprise, or, I don't know, kidnapping something the gods really attached to and using the army in that way.
Well, we established last week that with the way that she was going around collecting her army, she would not be doing a small elite task force. She would be assembling a massive army of the most well-trained soldiers in the world.
In the afterlife world.
Well, it would start off in the normal world, in the overworld, and then they would all come to the afterlife world as fully trained soldiers.
They're being gathered in the afterlife.
Yeah, like, I think that's like once you die, you're immediately sent to this army. Which that does beg the question, what happens to people who aren't part of the army? Do they go to a different part of the... that's interesting. What if there were different gods that you served under, or you were under the care of in the afterlife, depending on how you lived your life, and essentially which god or goddess you gave your life to? So this army would be belonging to this goddess because they all gave their souls to the goddess. But maybe somebody who didn't give their soul to the goddess or any other sort of god in general, maybe there's some sort of default god or default part of the afterlife that they just go to, where they're serving under, I don't know, the fish god. Or maybe there's ones for, say, farmers, where it's like a farmer might give part of his soul for good crops. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely an interesting concept, which has a basis in like our actual mythology on this earth, especially if you think of the Norse, and a lot they go to a different afterlife depending on how they die. So the idea of going to a different afterlife or part of the world based off of what god you serve, I guess makes sense. Or I know at least in the D&D campaign that I'm actively listening to, that's something they do. So there's a bunch of different gods, and in the afterlife, when you die, you go to that god's like afterlife place where they care for your souls after you've passed away.
Thing is, I'm thinking that in this scenario, maybe there's gods that don't necessarily care for your soul, like they will protect you uh and provide for you and all that in the afterlife. Some might, but I'm thinking in the case of something like this warrior goddess, she's more continuing to have these soldiers serve her and is collecting them to overthrow another god, or maybe inflict massive damage on another god's people.
So that's the thing. Like, what happens? Can you? And if so, what happens if you die in the afterlife?
Uh, I don't know. I'm wondering about that because that's always an interesting concept. It's like, what happens when one dies in the afterlife? Because the idea is that you're basically just a soul now, but if your soul is destroyed, then there's nothing left, meaning you would just stop existing. But I feel like that's sort of a boring answer.
But something has to happen.
We could,
But the idea of just being able to respawn also seems kind of dumb.
yeah. Both ideas I don't like. I think that maybe. What about the idea of when someone dies, they don't fully die? Like their soul is more scattered to the winds, essentially, and they become one with the Force. I mean, one with the afterlife, where they all essentially share one massive omniscient entity.
That sounds horrible. I mean, I guess gives them a reason not to want to die in the afterlife.
Yeah, it's just the question of, do we want this to be a horrible scenario where they're all sharing this entity, they're all sharing each other's thoughts, and you just have so many thoughts racing constantly, or you're all stuck with only one thought, or do we where it's this horrible experience, or do we want it to be more peaceful, sort of setup where when you become one with the afterlife or whatever, then it's more like you can just travel anywhere you want and see anything you want.
You just lose all right to interact with anything.
Maybe there would be like certain areas or certain scenarios where you could interact, similar to how you often have stories about people from the afterlife coming back in the spirit form. It would be something like that, where there might be certain points where they could come back in a certain form to interact with.
I don't know. At this point, this TV series is already on season like 10, so maybe it should just end. They go into their spirit form and they can't interact with anything anymore, and they're now just watchers of what's happening in the world, and that's the end. The end. We're done. We're finished.
It just seems so boring is the problem.
Yeah, but like you already had the epic afterlife story arc though. Like you already died and got put into an afterlife war. Like at some point you have to hit like the calm, this is the end scenario, and between ceasing to exist or forming into a mindless entity that is the afterlife, or having a peaceful existence of watching but not interacting, I like the third option best.
I mean, you could at least frame it in the story in such a way that it seems extremely peaceful, and it's like sort of what the characters always wanted. So you could have a character dreaming of a peaceful era where he's just able to sit on a mountaintop watching a sunset but he's never able to do something like that. He doesn't have time for that. He's like, he maybe doesn't even live near any mountains. But then after this big battle in the overworld, then in the big battle in the afterlife, he's restored peace to the lands, and now he's able to go anywhere he wants. So he chooses to go sit on top of a mountaintop and watch the sunset, and then the book ends. So the movie ends, or whatever it is. The very long show of like 10 seasons. So you could frame it in that way.
So he doesn't die in the afterlife. He just gets what he wants in the end.
Yes. I mean, you don't have to think too much about what he does after that, because that could be boring. But at least what you see at the end is he's very happy. You could even have it be, maybe his wife died at some point, but now that they have both died in the afterlife, they can be together forever.
I guess.
Maybe you could have it be in the afterlife, you can essentially create whatever you want, or create a certain scenario that you would like, or items. They're just not real, and they can't interact with the physical world. So if you wanted to like play chess in the afterlife, you could. You just can only play chess with other people who have died twice.
Okay, so you die in the afterlife, you go into the spiritual realm, and now you can still interact with other spirits. It's just, there's no more death, and there's no real, your actions don't have any real meaning on what's going on in the either afterlife or in the first life.
Yes, you are worry free, and you just you watch the world exist, and that's about it. It's still, I'm trying to think of ways to make it less boring.
Yeah, at the end of it, like, when you're done, you're done.
It's just your life has no meaning and no purpose beyond that point for all eternity.
So how about we build the afterlife and not think about the depressing afterlife?
Okay. So in the afterlife, we've got this. So now we've got this war goddess who is assembling her army to overthrow another god. What kind of god would you need an army to overthrow, where he couldn't just flick his hand and destroy them all?
So what if it's like, I'm trying to think how we can make it so that the gods actually need people in the afterlife. It could be that certain gods are destined to always be fighting each other, and whoever's winning at that moment has the biggest sway on the normal life. Like their power levels are directly involved in their afterlife army and their success.
So we're not talking about different gods and goddesses with different roles. They all essentially are gods of war, and they all.
Well, I think there could be competing gods of the same brand, and they would compete. Like, gods of war would have to compete with each other for who gets recognized and who has the most power on Earth, and it's directly connected to these armies they have in the afterlife. But I do think that there would be gods who are a bit more peaceful, because some people, not everyone's a warrior, so there would be gods who they got people from farming and stuff, and the more worshippers they have, the more ability they can help their current followers, like with their farming and like grow crops, because they have more power. So for a warrior goddess, if she's winning the war, she can life transfer a bunch of people and keep growing her army faster. But if her people start like slacking behind, she then doesn't have as much power in the real world to help out her followers there, which I think could add a lot of interesting dynamic, not only to the afterlife stage of the story, but also to the first life stage of this story of a goddess who fluctuates in power for reasons that the main character is confused by and is not fully understanding until he gets to the afterlife, and then suddenly he's like, I I see now why she fluctuates in power, and it's because of this reason. And now I have a say in helping her maintain her power, so people on Earth who are serving her don't have the same issues I did when I was serving her. Could also give him some more motivation for why he would be so dedicated to the Afterlife Army.
You said not everyone's a warrior, and talking about different gods in that sense, and I just immediately, what popped into my head was the god of the hippies, and he's just sitting there
Like
with
a
like
peace-loving
long hair
god?
saying, the hippie people think you need to give love a chance. That's just what came into my head.
Sure
And then you've got this army of hippies in the afterlife, all together, probably on a bunch of afterlife drugs. I don't know what those would do, but I'm very curious now.
I'm concerned about where your brain's going right now. Like a god of or goddess of like peace and love makes sense. There's also maybe goddesses of like family and like there could be a bunch of various powers depending on.
So we've got all those competing gods where we've got like the different gods of war and everything. So we've got different gods of love and family, and one of those gods is the hippie god.
Sure. I don't think that's what they call him though.
Okay, so the accident god, the one that no
What?
one wants.
What do you mean? You mean the god with no power, actual
Yes.
power?
It's like he's got
I'm sure there's probably a bunch
maybe
of them.
200 followers on the Earth total.
And not many in the afterlife.
Nope.
But this also, I think this is an interesting dynamic also because it forces these gods and goddesses to actually care about their keeping alive their afterlife armies, because if they lose too many of their afterlife army peoples, they lose a lot of power on the real Earth, and that could cause them not to be able to commission as many afterlife army people, which means that they start going on the decline. And once you start going on the decline, I'd imagine it'd be a bit difficult to go back up. I think it's possible. You could do it. It would just take a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifices, and you know they're very busy warring gods. They don't have time for.
I just
for
thought
that.
about something. So, the idea with the goddess, this goddess in particular, she's trying to build her army so she has more say over what happens on Earth. Yes.
Yeah.
So, what if we made her the villain? And secretly, she's building up her army because she wants that influence over Earth. But her end goal is to take this massive army and send their souls back to Earth and conquer Earth, so that she has full control over it, and the other gods cannot gain control back.
So the reason she's actually warring with other gods in the afterlife is because they're trying to stop her with her plan.
I would say that maybe instead they aren't trying to stop her. They're all just trying to gain their own power. They're all just trying to gain their own say over what happens on Earth. But none of them suspect that she's actually planning on going to Earth with her army, because they're all like, oh no, that can't be done, or it's not allowed, or you don't have that kind of power. But secretly, that is her end goal.
Well, this person that we're following, obviously, his whole role in this would be he would be coming around in the time when she's almost there, like she's almost succeeded, and then he could help her succeed.
And then afterwards, he's like, what have I done? I need to stop this. And probably what he would end up doing is somehow delivering a certain item to her that she needs in order to send her army to Earth. Like, she might need some sort of magical relics or items that only he can obtain. For some reason, maybe it's only an area that's only accessible to a human, and it's heavily guarded and defended and has traps that would be designed to kill a human. But he's so smart and clever and stuff that he's able to bypass them and get the items she needs. Because the idea would be, it's god proof. Like, it has a shield that keeps gods and goddesses out, so she can't enter it. Only human can. He goes in. Defense is set up so that humans can't get through, but he manages to work his way past anyway. She gets the item and sends her army to Earth.
And you can have she could have, like, she has her army of elite people, but then she has her little team of elite people. Like, these are the people who took her maybe too seriously in the first life, and she's like, these are my highly trained, and she's been slowly collecting and protecting those people specifically for this task. And she's been waiting for a while for the perfect leader to show himself who could be able to complete these tasks, and he is it. And so, and this would make sense if we wanted her to show up more in the show, talking to him and interacting with him, because if he's a special interest to her, because she thinks he could be the leader of her elite task force within her elite army.
Yeah, and
what a compliment, though. Like, yeah. Could you imagine, like, being like, I want you to be the leader of the most elite group of people in all of history, who are over an elite army consisting of all of, like, the greatest warriors throughout history.
Yeah, that would be
what an accomplishment. And at one point in his life, he was a termite. So,
yep. He just turned into a bug in order to save his life one time.
Yep. Yeah, and this person who wasted a life as a bug is the person who's gonna be the elite of the elite. He was out of
options.
Yeah, that's just so funny to me, but I think it's great. And then he gets his little redemption arc when he realizes that he screwed over Earth.
Yeah, and so now he's got to go and destroy this item that he got that is now heavily guarded by an army of elite warriors.
And he might, in order to do that, have to team up with some of the other gods. And so we get, like, the side of, like, the other warring god. And then along the way, the warring god's like, yes, we'll help you capture this item. And he realizes, like, at some point during it, that this person just wants to take it for himself so he can also do the same thing she's doing. Because he realizes, oh, that's actually a cool idea and a good idea. I want to do that too. So he partners up with him, well aware that he just wants the item to do the same thing, but he still uses and, like, schemes his way into getting to the item and then actually destroying it properly. And then all the gods are angry at him, and now, and for that reason, he gets sent to the afterlife. But he's content with how he's lived his life and that he saved Earth, and he has a happy time in the afterlife.
Yeah, I like this story. And now he has saved the world. He's brought peace to the world. He might have caused some of the death and destruction, but it ended in peace.
Now all the gods are angry at him. But you know what? He's in the afterlife, and they can't touch him there.
Yeah, and now the gods can never send their armies down to Earth.
Yeah. They can only continue doing what they were before, which is... And possibly while doing that, he downgraded the two war gods to such a point that, like, they might not even be able to recover. Also, if a goddess sends an army down to Earth to take it over and destroy it, suddenly I'm not going to want to serve her as much as I might have once did.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of her army was sent to the afterlife. Like, during this process. Same thing with the other army, because they're fighting each other now. And then, that's not even including all of the soldiers on Earth that are fighting these elite soldiers that have come back from the afterlife. Actually, that's a good question. Can a mortal person kill a spirit or a soul soldier?
I feel like they can. I think that this is a case, like, because there is an afterlife, you're able to send them to that place. I could allow keep hauntings down and stuff if the spirits who are, like, haunting and interacting with the Earth, or humans who do that, they know that they could die again, and this time for good if they do that.
Well, I don't know if they can hunt because they would need a way back to Earth. And the idea is that humans can't go back to Earth. The goddess can go to Earth. That's how she's able to go
Yeah.
and recruit new soldiers. But she needs the special item in order to send her army to Earth.
That's true. Yeah. And then you have the rest of the gods who are just watching this happen, being like, great.
So is there a leader god? Like, is there a high god council or something?
Is there a god above the gods?
Yeah, I'm thinking that this item was locked away many millennia ago or whatever, so that no god could abuse its power. But who decided that? Like, was it a group of gods just all agreed with this is too much power to fall into anyone's hands, and so they locked it away?
See, this is the slippery slope of having imperfect gods in a story, is that suddenly you start questioning if there's a god over that, and you just want to keep going back until you do have that god that's in full control of everything. I don't know. I think a Council of the God probably makes the most sense. Like, especially considering there's only really, like, 2 warring gods, and maybe these 2 have been a problem for a while. And at some point, maybe they were at such a peak. Or maybe there was, like, another warring god, like, only one, and this god, got to such a high peak that he was able to create this device, and this thing, and started to use it to attack the world, and the other gods had to intervene to stop it. And they locked it away, destroying this warrior god in the process completely, or like downgrading them to the point where they had no army. And then 2 other warrior gods were able to rise from the ashes there. But before they could, the device was locked away by all the non-war related gods who were like, we don't want to deal with this.
So now I have a question. Why can't they destroy it? How does the main character destroy it? Because it has to be in some way that the gods can't. Otherwise they would destroy it instead of locking it away. Does it have to itself be brought to the real world, perhaps? That it's just that the gods had no way of bringing it there? Because they can't bring things
I mean,
to...
we've already established... Oh,
They
okay,
can
so
go,
that's true.
but they can't bring someone with them, so I don't think it would be a stretch to say they can't bring the item with them. And so maybe when it's in the afterlife, the item is essentially immortal. But if she brings it to the overworld while transporting her army, maybe that's an opportunity to destroy it. It then becomes
Maybe,
mortal.
but that makes me think, like, why wouldn't the gods just get a person, one of their many, many faithful servants, to come when they had it, to use it to go to the main world and destroy it?
Maybe it's got other magical properties where... I suppose if there was a faithful servant, then maybe they could. Or maybe they just didn't trust anyone.
Or Isaac. Or we have the cheesy chosen one trope where only a specific person of like the highest warrior and mightiest wit has the core, like has ability in their soul to be able to destroy it, and in order to find that person they had to lock the key away in a weird dungeon thing which only that type of person could complete to grab the key, and their hope was that whoever did that would be like one of their followers who would then destroy it. How were they supposed to know that it would actually be one of the war goddess's followers who would do it and deliver it to her?
I think that works. I don't care if it's cheesy. I don't care if it's such a comedy trope. I like it.
Look, we've already established this guy is just the elite of the elite of the elite, and also the purest. I don't know. I wouldn't say purest of soul, but like something about him is.
He's the greatest warrior to ever
special.
live.
Yes, and it's the reason why the goddess has been training people, was specifically so she could find this person who she believed could. This could be like person number 8,000 she has sent into this dungeon to retrieve this key. Like at this point, like she just keeps trying, and this is the one who happens to succeed for whatever reason, and he brings it back and then instantly regrets it, but because he was able to unlock it, that means he has the ability deep inside him to destroy it, and he does.
Yes.
We've created the chosen one trope, and I'm okay with
I
it.
like it. But now I have a question. Can you kill a god?
I think the closest thing you can do is I think the only way to like destroy them is to destroy their presence on Earth. Like once they lose all followers on Earth, that kind of weakens them, and maybe at that point they could be killed. Like if there's no one remembering them on Earth, they have nothing keeping them alive, and at that point they can be killed.
Yeah, at that point they're basically nothing. But the thing is, they could still go to Earth, is the thing. And so I don't think they're ever going to run out of followers because they just go and they keep on recruiting more followers.
Well, what I'm saying is like they could get to such a weak state due to lack of followers that they can be killed in the afterlife.
And if that happens, what happens to them? Do they go to the afterlife, or do they just cease to exist, or is there something else?
I think they'd cease to exist. Like that's the price they pay for the immortality and like the ability to gain followers.
Okay.
Is that they lose an ability of joining the afterlife, which almost makes me think that people could choose to be like gods, like a specific person who's gained enough following in the real world and enters into the afterlife could choose to take on that, give up the ability to go to the afterlife in favor for risking it to be like an immortal god, even though there's that chance that you could lose all your followers and die and just cease to exist, which could be another path option for our main character. Instead of like now he's saved the world, and people on Earth have probably going to be aware of it, or we can make them aware of it because we're writers and we can do what we want, and so they could give him that option for him to be like, oh, I could take the warrior goddess's place and become a warrior god who actually believes in like fighting for justice and stuff and for good, and have a bunch of followers who do that, and so he could take her place in that sense, and that could be a cooler ending maybe than just ceasing. Or you could have him denying that and deciding he doesn't want that, and then him entering the afterlife is more meaningful because he actually gave up something as grand as being like a warrior god in order just to have peace, and then it means more. And it's a sweeter ending.
I think both endings work really well because in one ending, he's getting the peace that you feel like he deserves, and in the other, he's bringing peace to the world.
Yeah. And then, when you have your reboot of the series, he gets to come back as the god.
Yep.
The show will never end, Isaac.
But I'm sitting here like, where do you go from there if he comes back as the god? He's now the god. There's nowhere else to go.
He's not the main character at that point.
He becomes the god in the High Council of Gods. He becomes like the Chancellor of the High Council of Gods. And
yeah. But he's not the main character at that point. Like at that point, he's reached the peak. He's entered mentor character stage. He's never coming back to main character. The show cannot be about him anymore. He's gotten too high.
He was already pretty high to begin with, because literally the greatest warrior in history. This is an overpowered main character.
I don't know what makes him this way, and I don't know how you would write a character like that.
I think he's just got this one trait where he's just a really, really, really good fighter, and he's a good problem solver, but that's it. You could still say...
I think he has to have, like, a relatively strong moral compass.
Yeah, and you could still have him be gullible. You could still have him not be able to take on an army of people. If there's enough people fighting him at once, he can get overwhelmed, because as long as there's enough people combining their might to match his, he can lose. If the other warrior god is looking for the greatest warrior ever, and he sends off his strongest warriors to go and face this one guy, he can be beaten and then turn into a termite. You can write a character like this and not have him feel like a Mary Sue.
I do kind of like the idea of like the strongest warrior in the world who's just also like just really gullible. Like, he just falls for the dumbest things. Because he has, like, he hates injustice, but he also is so optimistic about the world and, like, believing the best in things that it often backfires on him throughout the series. But the thing that makes him, like, pure and able to take this item is the fact that he still continues to trust humanity, even when humanity keeps screwing him over and making him turn into a termite at one point. Like, he still chooses to have trust. And maybe, like, the fact that he still chooses to trust the goddess, despite all of this and, like, the rumors and the ideas, like, the fact that he still sees good in her. And I feel like she has to have such an active role in this series, just because I think it'd be so interesting. I think as a villain, she could be so fascinating in the sense that she's not a pure villain. Like, she's as a very complicated villain who's building a relationship with this main character, and he's genuinely believes that she can be a good person and that he has the ability to turn her into that by being his, like, while he's serving her. And she shows signs of that and favoritism towards him, but in the end she chooses the villain route. But we get to see why she does and get backstory along the way and stuff, and it makes sense.
The only risky part I see about this is that I could see a lot of people watching this show and thinking that she will turn good by the end of it, and they're expecting that. They see that as a promise, as a setup, and then it's never delivered upon. I could see a lot of people getting very upset with that because they expect her to change, and it never happens.
I know, but sometimes they just don't.
Yeah, but when you constantly bring up, like, that she can change and he wants her to change, he's trying to make her change, and then he never accomplishes that, I think there's a lot of people who are going to say, you told me she was going to change, and then she never did.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that, but I also think maybe for the sake of story, her not changing and in the end succumbing and just sticking.
Yeah, but how many people would be upset by that?
And it backfiring. I don't know. I guess it depends how well it's done. And I guess it also kind of depends on the root of the story. If the story ends up and the better ending and stuff is her getting saved, then that's the way the story should go. But if the story ends and it feels like the best thing to do is her to be taken out, then that's the way the story should go. Like, I see both endings having a lot of pros and cons, and there's so many roots and, like, areas and dynamics in this world, in this story, that I don't know which one would end up being the best without actually writing the entire series, which we're not.
I think I have a solution.
Yeah.
All we need to do is introduce a new character, someone who is very similar to the goddess and is an awful person, but it manages to change through the actions of the main character. And so we get sort of a parallel arc, whereas the goddess might have a more negative arc, and the goddess never changes, but this one other person that was very similar to the goddess does. And so we're not being... So even though he's constantly trying to get the goddess to change, the writer is not telling us, or we're not telling the audience or anything, the goddess is going to change. The audience is being told, no, this one person is going to change. Even though the main character is constantly saying he's going to change the goddess, we know that's not going to happen. We know that this other person is meant to change.
Yeah, that would
yeah,
work.
This way you can have that ending where the goddess doesn't change, and it still feels very narratively satisfying because you don't feel like she was ever meant to change.
And then there's a potential for enemy to lover trope.
Yes.
Just saying, just throwing it out there. It doesn't have to happen, but there's that little potential there. And I love a good enemy to lover trope.
And then they sit on the mountaintop watching the sunset together in the afterlife, playing chess.
Yeah. Sounds like a nice ending. And, after 10 seasons, hopefully them playing chess is satisfying enough for
Maybe
the
they
viewers
won't be playing
who committed
chess.
like 12 years of their lives.
Eventually they'll get bored and they'll say, so, want to be a god now? Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's be gods now.
And then, after 5 years when people are like, oh, that was a classic series, should never touch it, then the sequel comes out with a new character. And they're like, are we really mentally prepared for another 10 seasons of this? Well, I feel like we made another show I really want to see come into existence and probably never will.
Yeah, I think this one turned out very well. We did a lot of world building with this one. We had 2 episodes to cover this. But that's because we essentially created 2 worlds.
We could, yeah, two halves to this story. Same person, one person going through all of this. 9 lives. This person's a cat. We just made a cat.
We have, haven't we?
Yes.
Oh no! I mean, he does. We were talking about him becoming a tiger at one point.
That was a thought, but then we went termite.
Well, he can do
instead.
both.
We also talked bear for a while.
Well, that's
too.
because it's just any animal in general. He switches between a bunch of different animals.
Yeah, I think it's more interest. Like, I feel like the animals are the shorter seasons, and then the longer, like full blown seasons, would be him as
Yeah.
the person. But we should probably end this here. Say goodbye to this world we've poured so much of our lives into.
Yeah, I think turned really well. Turned out very well.
Yeah, I miss it.
All right. Well, we will see you all next week with a whole new world.
Yeah. Yeah. See you guys then. Bye.
I just suddenly stopped. I felt like I was supposed to say something else, but my mind went blank. See you all next week with a whole new world. And
Bye.
Disney's
Just bye.
Bolt is a good movie. Goodbye, everybody.